Thank you to ACE Update for inviting me to this webinar. The topic of net zero and green is so relevant in today's times of climate change. And to talk about this for airports, which impact large part of our community, makes it easy. Practicing consultant, we come across multiple challenges in our clients' pursuit towards net zero and green. I will touch upon 3 such challenges today, which we at Conserve has experienced. Though there are many others, these 3 come to the top of my mind. Let's first start with net zero carbon. I'll try and answer that question today about carbon accreditation and what is net zero carbon. The most common carbon abatement program for airports in India is the Airport Carbon Accreditation by ACI, that is the Airport Council International. The rules for airport carbon accreditation states that there are 7 levels of certification, starting with level 1, 2, 3, 3+, 4, 4+, and 5. In India, there are 31 airports which have been under this accreditation program, and 3 of them have reached level 5. The airport accreditation program says that if you reach or maintain or are equal to 90% of the absolute CO2 emission in scope 1 and scope 2 and commit to net zero for scope 3 by 2050 or earlier, then you are at level 5. I'll repeat this as it is difficult to understand. The accreditation program says that if you are able to maintain 90% of the absolute CO2 emission in scope 1 and 2 and commit to net zero for scope 3 by 2050 or earlier, then you are at level 5. Now, let's look at the some numbers of scope 1 and scope 2 for Indian airports. For Indian airports, scope 1 comprises of around 5 to 10% of the total carbon emission, and scope 2, the balance 95 to 90%. The main component of scope 2 is electricity. And if you offset your electricity consumption with renewable energy, then you can effectively neutralize the carbon emission for scope 2. In India, green power is cheaper than grid power. So replacing electricity with renewable energy is a no-brainer. In fact, it is not even a carbon abatement decision. It is a financial decision as it is lower in cost as compared to grid power. So, reaching 90% carbon reduction for scope 1 and scope 2 in India is easy. And with a bit of effort, one can reach level 5 of airport carbon accreditation, but it does not make us net zero on carbon emission. Net zero is more of an arithmetic word which communicates that we should mathematically be net zero, and the emission for that scope mentioned should be equal to 0. Of late, accreditation bodies have started to use the word near net zero when the maths do not tally up to net zero, but they are close to net zero. So, one of the biggest challenges that we face presently on carbon in India and claims of net zero in India is the lack of any credible guidelines which factor in Indian conditions and motivates organizations to develop innovative methods to achieve net zero, facility green. Coming to airports, it is interesting to note that there are no green building rating by any national or international council exclusively for airports. Green ratings have been developed for data centers, metro rails, hospitals, hotels, school, you name it. Even places of worship have a green rating, but nothing yet on airport. Presently, airports in India use the green rating system for commercial buildings, both during their construction and even during their operations. The results are confusing, as airports have their own complexities and cannot be fitted into a commercial building rating program. I would therefore urge all green councils to develop a separate rating system for airports considering the number of airports that we have in India and the rate at which we are expanding. The real advantage of these rating systems is arriving at a credible benchmark which are useful to compare and contrast. For example, on energy, there is no clear benchmark for airports. Some use EPI, that is the Energy Performance Index. Some use energy consumption per pax. Similarly, on water or carbon, there are no clear benchmarks which can be used for comparison. However, as a rating system, the more data we get on airports, the rating systems come up with some very credible benchmarks. We have seen this happen across sectors like data centers, hospitals, and commercial buildings. And we would love to see that happening for airports too. Presently, airport professionals struggle with what would be the right benchmark for their airports. So this is another big challenge that we have presently in India. The next challenge that we have experienced for Indian airports is water management, specifically the rainwater management. In 2 cities, we have seen evidence that whenever there is a heavy downpour around an airport, the stormwater drains and canals surrounding the airport were flooded, causing hardships to lakhs of people living in those areas. To develop an airport, we require thousands of acres of land. With climate change comes climate risks, like cloudbursts, heavy downpours, which create havoc around large open areas where the rainwater harvesting has not been adequately designed. Climate resilience studies need to be taken up afresh for all airports to check on these flood risks. There is a connection of all this from a green and net zero perspective. Recently, we were doing a project where a green rating was done and the project achieved a platinum rating. It got all the credits points pertaining to water, which includes the rainwater harvesting system. However, when we attempted to do a net zero water study for the same project, it was not meeting the net zero water calculations. We realized that the rainwater harvesting calculations used for the green rating system are different than what has been used to arrive at the net zero water calculations. So for design, we use a different set of calculations, and for net zero, we use a different set of workouts. This is indeed a challenge because we are not able to connect the dots from design to operations. There is even a problem of boundary conditions of a project. For a green rating, the boundary conditions were taken just for the terminal building without the airside being included. But for net zero, one has to consider the whole campus, including all the entities and their individual water consumption. This created disparity, and it is indeed a very big challenge. This is an important challenge to solve as it impacts the community where the airport is catering to, and it also connects green, net zero, climate resilience all together. My intention was to sow some thoughts in the minds of all our participants to start thinking afresh on how to solve these challenges. Thank you.